Hi, Mark Pearson, Executive and Artistic Director of the College Light Opera Company, coming to you from upstage left at the Highfield Theater. Welcome to BackStage, a week in review of work being done by our talented design and production students. Let's see what they've been working on.
Kristen Knutson, Production Manager and Technical Director. This week, the design and production team was tasked with an aging and distressing project. They found objects that could be articles of clothing or prop items, anything that was new looking, and they were to distress or age those pieces so that they looked weathered, broken, beat up, like they have a history, something that isn't fresh and new but has been lived in. You will also see portions of their workshop discussion with scenic artists and my very good friends, Gerard Vogt and Heather Morris.
Yeah, I went to the State University of New York at Fredonia. Actually started off in performance and then ended up getting a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in scenic design and painting. And then after graduating, I freelanced kind of all over the place. The Goodspeed Opera House in Connecticut, Spoleto Festival in Charleston, South Carolina, a bunch of other regional theaters. For 3 summers, I was the charge painter at Theater by the Sea in Mattoonic, Rhode Island. And then I was the charge painter at the now defunct, unfortunately, Studio Arena Theater in Buffalo, New York. And then was the assistant charge painter at the Huntington here in Boston. And then moved over to the American Repertory Theater as the charge painter here for the last, believe it or not, 21 years. But also, I've done a few films locally here. I've worked at Mystic Scenic and WGBH Public Television here in Boston.
I like to say I took the scenic route. Haha, I'm so funny. I double majored in both psychology and art. I ended up putting on a double major because I had been taking so many art courses that it would be stupid for me not to. I got my master's degree in art therapy. I moved up to Cambridge and I went to Lesley University, got my master's in mental health counseling with a specialization in art therapy. And I wanted to be an art therapist since, high school. I was taking all kinds of psychology courses and art was just like my hobby. And I had been painting, I think since I was around 5. My parents started sending me to like after school art programs and everything, but it was never like a career thing. I didn't come from a family where they were very arts based. It was always, this is a fun thing that you do. And so I finally landed a job in an outpatient program, helping people get into galleries with like outsider art and things like that. They were going to pay me $13 an hour for a master's level position working with, a very difficult population, but I took it because that's all I could find. And then the week before I was about to start, I get a phone call that the program lost funding and they were shut down. And it really just made me kind of reevaluate everything. I had been working with a photographer friend of mine. She had a home studio and she liked to do, really intricate sets. So I was like helping her build props and sets and paint things for her. And she had a theater background. And she was like, you should look into like working in theater. And I was like, hell no. I had really bad theater experience in high school and I didn't like theater people. I didn't like theater. I thought it was, a thankless job and I didn't, no way. Well, I'm not going to touch that with a 10 football. But I did eventually end up applying and getting a job for an ultra low budget movie that was filming in Martha's Vineyard. So I interviewed to work on props and the director looks at me and I told him, I have no experience in film, no experience in theater. I paint, I'm good at keeping a schedule. I'm very efficient. And the guy looks at me and goes, you put in here, you want to work on props, but I think you'd make a good art director. So I said, okay. And I went home and I wonder what an art director does. I guess they'll tell me. And turns out I had no idea what I was doing. I got yelled at a lot. I got called incompetent a lot. Nobody told me what I was supposed to be doing, but I turned out to be the unsung hero of it all because I can work quickly on my feet and I am a fast learner and I just kept up with it. That's how I got my start into essentially becoming a scenic. I thought, you know what, I want to do this. I enjoyed it and I was surprisingly good at it. So I ended up applying for internships to get my foot in the door somewhere. I was unemployed for like a year and a half. Long story short, I got an internship at ART in Run Crew on Sleep No More. And that was my first exposure in theater. And I really loved it. And then my internship ended and I said, you know, I really want to be a painter. I want to work on the sets. They gave my information over to Jerry and really they just hired me as an intern for cheap labor to repaint the ceilings white. I'm on scaffolding with Kristen for like a month straight.
It was a great bonding experience.
But we were in the trenches. That's how Chris and I became really good friends. I've been around ever since. I ended up going back over to the shop and actually learning, scenic painting. And then they decided, maybe Jerry does need an actual official assistant. So they built the position for me as his assistant. I was in the right place at the right time and I got my foot in the door and made sure it stayed there.
One thing that I have learned to do at the American Repertory Theater, because of our time constraints, as well as the sort of high demands, is to really try to almost rethink processes that I've been taught. And this parquet floor is a very, very good example. Just trying to think outside the box on this one, instead of approaching it like we normally would with priming it out, basing it a color, and then doing graining steps and then glazing steps and all that stuff. I just tried to flip things on its head and said, okay, what can we get away with? What if we stain the MDF? And what if we use graining tools as part of the staining process? So what you're looking at here is literally just raw MDF that has been stained, either the sort of golden color or the more brown, deeper brown color. We grained through the stain, let it dry, and then sealed it. That's all that this is.
And I know you've utilized that trick since a couple times on
Yeah, I have actually. So that's the kind of thing that I think, we go to school and we learn processes or we learn from people who we've worked with. And it's almost like every time in theater, depending on the budget, depending on the time schedule, can even be depending on, if there's just two of you, like Heather and I, or if you're able to hire 6 painters, you kind of have to constantly sort of replan how you do things.
Yeah, the first drawing is Dan Conway, the designer's elevation, and then the bottom is the product.
And what made this so successful was that the designer had very, very thorough, very complete draftings and paint elevations for everything. And so this is where I can't stress enough that as a future designer, the best collaboration you're going to have with those who are charged with executing your design is that you have as thorough information as possible. The big takeaway that I would like to pass on to you guys as designers, and this, this applies to costume as well. I know a lot of you are costume design majors, is just the communication. Communicate, verbally as well as, in your elevations and drawings, as much as you possibly can.
Your ideas can be great and they can be pie in the sky and wonderful, but then you have to remember to rein it in because you're putting it out in reality where physics exists and budgets exist and time exists and
40 feet exists. There's 40 feet, roughly speaking, between your design and the audience.
The first step I took was to make the cover of my book. I used recycled materials for the book jacket. I then folded 48 pieces of paper and made them into sets of 6, which is called a signature, thus making the book 96 pages. I then aged each piece of paper individually through the process described. Part of the aging process that I wanted for this book was coffee stains on the front and back cover. Once every sheet of paper was aged, I refolded them and reconstructed each signature, carefully folding each piece once again. Then sewed each signature to each other, creating the booklet. I then created the spine by adding many layers of glue and as well as a piece of cloth with another few layers of glue. And then I glued in the end pages and glued the end pages to the jacket. I used sandpaper to create the much more worn parts of the book cover, as well as some additional painting to create the look that I wanted for this book. I then used my hands to kind of wear in the book a little bit more naturally than just with the sandpaper and paint, so it would have a very worn feeling. Here are some pictures of the aged book next to a similarly constructed book that was not aged at all.
Hi everybody, my name is Thomas J. Charles, and today I'm going to take you through a little stage makeup tutorial. So for today's tutorial, I'm not using really anything fancy. This is sort of like my pandemic black eye. I'm using just cosmetics that you'd find at the drugstore. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that I'm going to start with is I'm going to start with a purple cream eyeshadow. The problem with things that you tend to get from the drugstore is that they all tend to be shimmery. So the key to this is finding as much matte makeup as possible because you don't want your bruise to be glitter. So I'm going to take this and I am going to concentrate my black eye around my eye, and I'm just going to do a little bit under my cheek and on my temple here. So I am going to find my eye socket, and I am just going to start right in the corner of my eye here. And I am just going to sort of poke my way all the way along this eye socket and take it all the way out to basically the corner of my eye. I am then going to go in at the top, and again finding the top of the eye socket. Essentially, it's like if you were doing drag, you're extending your crease. So your crease is your part where your eyeball essentially meets its socket. So we're going to effectively extend our crease and start again from the corner of the eye and trace up and in around the eye socket. And we're really going for like right in the middle, or right this is a little high, right on the gushy part of our socket here. And I'm just gonna make this a complete circle. Just like that. So we want our bruise to look nice and dark. That's the part that's gonna make the bruise. So we're gonna go back in and add some other colors to this. But first, I'm gonna do the same. I'm gonna get right under, just under the apple of my cheek here, and that's the part that when you smile, it's this squishy part that everyone, like the grandmas, like to grab. So we're just gonna put a little bit, just like a little smile, underneath, like that, like so. So just a little bit of accentuation on that, and then I'm gonna go ahead, and there's a squishy part of your your forehead's all bone because it's all skull, but there's a squishy part right here. I'm gonna go ahead and just put a little bit, sort of like this little C motion here. We're going for, the idea that I'm looking for here is like you got punched with someone's fist. It's like someone's fist was coming right at your eye. So we're making everything round. We're not going for any hard lines or anything like that. And obviously this is all going to get blended. This is not the end. This is very much just, this part is really to give me the guidelines, and then I'm gonna go back and add some more color and some shading and blend it out from here. So next I'm gonna go in with some dark eyeshadow. In a perfect world, you would use cream for the whole thing. But again, pandemic eye makeup. So I was not able to find black or dark gray cream makeup. If you have like a bruise wheel from like Ben Nye, which is gonna be a cream makeup kit that you can get, which is gonna have all the colors you need, that would be ideal, but I don't. So that's why I'm using all drugstore products. So this is just some dark gray eyeshadow. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this and essentially tracing the bottom of this purple arc, all of my purple arcs. I'm just gonna trace it with this, it's sort of like a dark charcoal, and I'm just gonna go all the way around. It is okay if it's not perfect, because bruises, as much as I would love for bruises to be symmetrical and even and pretty, they're not. I'm just gonna go in here and get all of this. Sort of like adding a shadow if you were drawing. And then I'm gonna do the same, and I just used the little brush from inside the kit because I need that accuracy. So I'm gonna go in now with some purple eyeshadow and essentially accentuate that, the purple part that we went in with the cream eyeshadow. And it's important, I feel like, that I mention that I'm not wearing any kind of foundation or anything like that. This is going right on my face. You don't want to really, this is not like drag makeup. We don't want to blend our bruise into our face, because it's, it's a blemish, and it sort of sits on us. It's really hard to hear while you're talking. So I'm not going to try and, although I'm going to buff this out and get it to sort of fade into my skin, I'm not going to try and blend it like into foundation or anything like that. I'm also gonna go back in with my black, and I'm just gonna darken, my eyelid a little bit. I don't want it to look like I'm wearing eye makeup, but I'm just gonna sort of do one of those. And I like a good dark under eye when I do a bruise. So, and I have horrible makeup base. I like drop my jaw open and everything. But I'm just gonna get underneath my lash line. Leaving, you can see I do have some space in there. So where I'm gonna go in and add a little bit of red to sort of simulate like the color that you get from a bruise. So now I'm actually gonna grab just a big fluffy brush, and I'm just gonna dab and just little circles and start to just buff this out a little bit, just so that it's not as harsh and on the top of my skin before I start to add the color. And as you can see, I don't know if you can tell because my lighting in my bathroom is not great, but when you blend and when you buff, some of the makeup is getting trapped in the brush. Keep buffing. I realized that I want to get a little more color up on the actual eye bone, so I'm actually going to go back in with a little bit of that cream purple again and just load up in here a little bit. And I actually like to use this to blend out the makeup, so that I'm not just when I start adding a little more color into it, I'm going to start adding a little bit more purple just to give it a little more depth and have it look a little bit more realistic. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep, you can of course blend cream with a brush, so I'm just going to keep blending and buffing. All right, also I'm going to use my finger and just sort of take away this hard line. Really what I'm trying to do is, you can see how down here it's starting to smear a little bit. That's really what I want. I just don't want there to be any like hard lines. If you think about, bruises in general, they don't have a lot of like hard structure to them. They're very soft, ironically. All right, that's gonna be good. So, like I said, pandemic bruise. So I did not have any good red. The purple that I actually bought, I thought it was going to be either a little more red or a little more purple, and it was smack down the middle. So I got creative, and I decided to get some lipstick. So what this is going to do is this is going to add the redness and sort of like the swelling to my bruise. So I'm just going to go ahead, I'm going to go in with this, and I'm just going to apply this sort of within all of my circles that I've made. I don't want to make it like look intentionally round, but I'm gonna go in and just on the inside of all of the circles, and then I'm gonna start to add some. It's a little too far on my nose. I am gonna start to add some a little bit here as well, just a little bit, and then I'm gonna go in, and this is what's adding that sort of swelling. I'm gonna go in. I'm honestly gonna start with my finger and just start to dab and stipple a little bit and just get this to sort of mix in. And I started with a little bit. I can always add more. It's just a little hard to take this off. So I'm just gonna stipple this in, dabbing and blotting with my fingers, and then I'm gonna go ahead and once I've gotten this started, I'm gonna take some of that off a little bit. I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna grab my brush again. I'm gonna grab my brush and just start to I don't wanna to smear. Same with like using a sponge. Smearing is gonna take off all the makeup. So I'm just gonna dab. I think I want that to be a little bit redder. I'm gonna just swirl in here a little bit. This needs to be softened out a smidge. We just need to soften this a little bit, I think. I'm gonna add just a little more red to this. This is not an exact science. What I'm trying to do though is I am trying to leave, this is like the bone, if you poke your cheek, this is the bony apple part of your cheek. I am trying to leave that relatively, relatively clean because I want it to look like it's starting to swell a little bit. So I'm just gonna put a little more over here, I think, and just get this to buff in. There we go. All right. I don't want any huge gaps like I have down there. This is where, all right. So it's getting there. I'm still not happy with, I feel like these lines are still a little bit too hard, so I am just gonna go in. I'm gonna load up that brush with that purple cream, just a smidge. I don't want too much on there, enough so that it's there. And I'm just gonna stroke over this again and blend out using this brush. I'm gonna wipe it on the towel that I have next to me here just to get it. I just dabbed a little bit on the bruise itself to make it look a little more, a little softer. And I'm just gonna do little circles to try and smooth this out a little bit here. I'm trying to make this a little bit more natural. It's not as hard as it was, because it was looking a little harsh. And then I'm just gonna get my big brush and just blend the whole thing a little bit. So as bruises age, they tend to turn a little bit yellow, a little bit green. So I have a little bit of yellow eye makeup here. I wish it was a little bit brighter, but I'm just gonna take, this is just an eyeliner brush that I'm using, and I'm just gonna put a little bit of this along the outside of this bottom here. And a little bit up here as well. I'm gonna put a little bit up here too. The yellow is really gonna go around the outside of your bruise. I don't know how well you can see that, if at all. Like I said, I do want this to be a little bit brighter. What's gonna help is the purple, as it blends out, is gonna start to become a little more patchy. And with my skin tone, it tends to look a little bit yellow anyway. So I'm gonna grab that same purple brush. It's relatively clean at this point, but it was just loaded with that purple. So I'm gonna dab, I don't wanna take it off, I just wanna blend it a little bit. So just a little, again, this little circles are key. I feel like it wants a little more down the bottom, so I'm just gonna add a little bit more at the very bottom of this. Might have been a little too much. Oops. Oh, that looks good actually, that looks alright. I'm gonna go ahead and add a little more to the other one over here. I might actually see if I can get a little more underneath that one, underneath that purple. Under my eye, I'm just gonna put a little bit there. I got it. And there you have it, little pandemic black eye with all the stuff you can find in a drugstore.
Hi everyone, my name is Katie Moran, and for this week's Aging and Distressing project, I found a box in my basement that needed a bit of a facelift, and this is how it went.
So this is the box that I found. It was in my basement. It's probably been there for a very long time. You can already see that there's a bunch of chipping happening everywhere and exposed wood. This is what it looks like on the inside. I don't actually go on into the inside. I just focus more on the exterior of it later in the video, but we're just going to take this, see what we can do with it, and give it new life.
So this is what we're dealing with. We have this box and I've set it up outside. I feel like I'm back at clock because it's all outside. I'm working outside. But we have this with some paper bags underneath just to protect the ground. And then I have some scraping tools to scrape off the paint. I have this paintbrush to put this stuff on. I found this in the basement and I really hope it works. Then we got some gloves just for protection and some rags just to clean stuff up if needed. I'm just gonna go ahead and distress this box, see what happens, and then we're gonna make it pretty once that's done.
So here I begin with putting the paint remover onto the box. You're supposed to put a fairly thick coat, and then after I did this, I went and left it sitting outside for about 30 minutes. I did a little bit longer just to see if it would help if it stayed longer. And this is what it looks like once you cover it completely with the liquid to remove the paint. And then after you come back after about 30 minutes, you want to try and scrape off the paint. And I had a lot of trouble here. Might have just been because I didn't really have a real paint scraper. This is more of a cheese cutter, which I realize isn't the most effective way of doing this. So once I realized it wasn't coming off as easily as I had hoped, I decided to just put another coat on, and I went away for almost over an hour just to see.
And another hour waiting for the paint chipper to work, and I think it is because it's starting to bubble, which I hope isn't a bad thing because maybe that'll help it work. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
And again, I did the scraping method, my very professional scraping method. And it did kind of work a little bit easier with leaving it alone for over an hour. So if you have something that has paint that's not exactly acrylic or from a can, you want to leave it there for a bit over an hour to really get some paint remover working. And after what was about 2, maybe 3 hours of trying to do this process, it just wasn't working how I wanted it to. So I decided that I wanted to give it more of a facelift. So instead of distressing it, I wanted to give it a new paint coat to make it kind of look like it's a box that's been through a lot of paint coats, and I think I achieved that look through this upcoming process. So first, I gave it a nice base white coat to give whatever color I was going to decide to put on it a brighter thing to work with underneath to really make the color pop and any other designs pop.
And I'm trying to find a place to do a time lapse, but it's not really working. Just because I'm out on my porch so that the paint stripper smell doesn't like fill up my house. So I'll try and figure out some way to film this a little bit better, but you'll see the product, you'll see the process.
And these are the pictures that inspired my design that I came up with for the box. It's nothing too extravagant, but I just thought they were really cute, and I wanted to make this something that looked like it'd been through a few generations of women. I made this into a jewelry box, and I wanted to really give it that classy feminine vibe, and I think that these photos kind of give where I'm going. But I decided to make the box blue, and I decided to mix this sky blue and this turquoise to just give the color that I wanted that was in between those two onto the box. And this is just what the lid looked like after I was done with that. So that's the color that I want to go with. You can see the underneath still. I didn't do too many coats because I still wanted the underneath to come through to really look like this box had been through the process of getting used and getting chipped and getting painted again. So you can really see the paint underneath it. The show that I would picture this box being used in is 5 women wearing the same dress. It's a show about a bunch of bridesmaids on a wedding day. I feel like it would really fit one of the characters, and I think it could be well used in the show while they're preparing for the wedding. And then I went ahead and made a little stencil to put on the top because I wanted to keep this simplistic but I just wanted to give it a little bit of personality. So I made this cute little stencil based off of one of my inspiration photos. And then I did some little details around the edges and on the sides of the box as well, just to give it a little bit of personality, but not too much. And this is the finished product. Though it's not technically distressed, I think that it does give off the sense that it's been passed down and revamped to fit every woman that it's been owned by in a generation of a certain family. So yeah, that's the final product. I really like it. I think it actually fits in very well with my room, so I will personally be using it as a jewelry box on my desk. And that's about all I have to say. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I will see you next week.
Hi everyone, my name's Maddie Boshin, and this week I'll be experimenting with different ways to distress a pair of jeans. So here are a couple of before pictures. They started out pretty new before I started distressing. I then went right at it and started distressing with an X-Acto knife, scissors, a seam ripper, and sandpaper. I wanted to focus on areas that I thought would get the most use or traction during someone's actual wear of the garment. So that means the waistband, pockets, and anywhere else that gets a frequent amount of use. I went little by little so I could better control the level of distressing on the garment. I worked my way around and ended up coming back to a lot of areas to make it more distressed. Remember that this is an additive process, so it's a lot easier to add more than to try and take away what you've already scratched up. One area I focused a lot on was the seams and the edges of the garment, because that's a place that your hand has to touch a lot. If this was an actual garment for a theater production, the person distressing it would want to take into consideration how long the show's run is, and how many times the garment would have to get washed, especially when choosing what supplies to use.
Because this wasn't for a show, I cheated a bit and used chalk pastels to imitate dirt on the pants. For a real production, you'd probably want a medium that was a little more permanent, maybe something like paint or dye. But chalk pastels were something I had on hand, and I found them to be really easy to rub into the fabric for a temporary look. Here I put a small cardboard rectangle into the pocket of the pants so that I could trace around it and sort of make it look bleached in the area where a wallet could have been or something that they'd keep in their pocket often. I also distressed the edges of where this would go. If this had been a garment that was being used on stage, I would probably spend a lot more time blending this area and maybe even use bleach instead of pastels to make it more authentic. I also made sure to distress the buttons a little bit and age them with some acrylic paint. This helps take out some of the shininess on them. I then wanted to experiment with some texture I could put on the pants. So for this, I took glue and some dirt from outside to add some texture to the buttons and the pocket of the pants. I also used the same mixture to put on the bottom where someone might have like walked in mud or something. Again, in the real world, you'd probably want to experiment with this type of thing, and it would probably come off in the wash, so you might want to use something more like joint compound or different types of glue and see what could stay on the garment, or even have a discussion about not washing it at all. So here I'm starting work on the hem of the pants. Parts of it I went pretty easy on, and they're less distressed, and the other side is a lot more jagged and crazy and really just like ripped, because I really just wanted to experiment with sort of the different tools I had and kind of see how crazy it could get. I used the pastels again, as well as the mud mixture that I made, and I think that it's a lot more successful here on the hem of the pants because it really looks like someone was like splashed or stepped right in the mud. So here's the final side-by-side of one side distressed and the other side not really anything done to it. I had a lot of fun with this, and I'd love to see how some of these methods could be used to make something for a show sometime.
Hi guys, Millie here, and today I wanted to talk about my distressing project and what I did to achieve the looks that I got. So, the idea of the story behind my pieces is that they had been trapped in a house for like 100 years and they had been touched, and the house did not have good heat control or moisture control. So the first object that I distressed was a glass bowl. This is what it looked like before I did any treatment to it. I then took really coarse sandpaper and just scratched it the surface of the glass to try and make it less shiny, and then I took these 4 colors of paint and I added them with a good majority of water. I mixed them together until I got this light brown color. I then, with a paper towel and a brush, applied the color to the bowl and dabbed it off so that way it just looked like a light frosting of dirt. I then took a dark brown color, and this is how I applied the dark brown. I wanted it to look like it was really dirty and the bowl was really gross. So this is what I did. And this is how it looked after I was done applying the dirt and it dried, or the paint to look like dirt. Then I took some water and I poured it into the bowl itself. I kind of wanted it to have that look that there was some water from the roof or something left in the bowl. Then I did a candle holder and snuffer. The material that these are made out of is pewter, but they had a silver color, so I was going more for a silver look. So the first thing I did is that I took 800 grit sandpaper and I sanded down the surface to make it look scratched, and also so it was less shiny. I then took some black spray paint and I sprayed it into a cup of water for 30 seconds and stirred it all together. Then with a brush and with a paper towel, I applied the mixture of water and paint to the surface, dabbing it off with the paper towel as I went until I got the desired look. I did this to try to achieve a patina look, or just making it look really old and dirty. I then used these 4 colors and I mixed them together with some water to try to make the surface of the metal look like it was slightly oxidized. I did this because oxidation happens when there is like no moisture control or there's some like heat, and I figured that this old house would have had some issues with moisture and heat. So what I did is that I just applied it very heavily and watery to the surface, and then I dabbed it away with a paper towel till I got the desired look. I then took that dark brown color and I applied it to the candle, which I glued into the candle holder to make it look like it was dirty as well. Then I made some dust just as a decorative finish. How I did this is that I took baby powder and I poured it into a cup, and then I added some powdered black eyeshadow and brown eyeshadow to the baby powder, and then mixed them together until I got a light gray color. I then applied the fake dust by either tapping on the surface that I was applying the dust to, or just flicking the brush towards it. It wasn't super effective, but I think that it added a nice little detail. And then this is how everything looked after it was all done. Another thing I did is that I burnt down the candle a little bit so that way it looked like it had been used before. And then there is the candle in action and the candle snuffer putting out the flame. Thanks for watching!
Hi everyone! So this week for the distressing project, I decided to do a makeup tutorial for you guys. I decided I wanted to go for more of a gory, post-apocalyptic look almost, like someone who has been through a lot. And I did half of my face, my right side of my face, will have tons of makeup on it, and the other half will just have a base layer foundation, just so you can kind of see the difference it makes with the strategies that I'm using. I use a lot of bruising and kind of playing around with the shape of my face to make my nose look a little more swollen, or to make my lip a little swollen, that sort of thing. When it comes to researching these images, it's kind of gross, I'm not gonna lie. I pull up on Google, I type in things like a broken nose or the aging of a bruise, so I know the difference between a 1-day-old bruise or a 3-day-old bruise or a week-old or 2-week-old bruise. And having these research images handy is very important so that you get a very accurate depiction of what these things would look like on your face. So when it comes to materials that I use a rainbow palette. It's a oil-based cream palette that works with the foundation that I use. I also use Scar Wax, which is this very pasty sort of wax that you can put on and kind of manipulate the way that you want to get the cut or texture that you want. And I also use an assortment of makeup brushes, which you'll see. So yeah, here we go. So to start us off, I had a base layer foundation and started going into the crease of my eye, under my eye, and the hollows of my cheek to really darken it out and really kind of have a hollow look. A lot of this makeup look and this type of makeup for me is a lot of going back and forth. I kind of eyeball it a lot. I don't really have a specific method to my madness. So I go back and forth, adding more color, less color, to kind of really simulate what I want. So after kind of doing my base contour, I add a little bit of yellow to my lip because I decided I wanted to have a cut on the top lip and a bruise on the bottom lip. So I went in with yellow, stippled in a little green, and then I remembered I wanted to use Scar Wax, which is what you see here. It's a kind of like a paste. It's very hard until you massage it, and then you kind of push it into your skin and blend out the edges. And then you can kind of carve whatever shape you want into it. So that's what I did here. I messed around with it. It's a little difficult to work with, but it's definitely worth it in the end. So once I had the desired look, I powdered it, made sure that it wasn't sticky anymore, and then went back in with that color. Here I'm bringing in some highlights just to really make the cheekbones pop, but I go back in with the yellow that I had started with, all around the edges of the cut and the kind of swollen bottom lip to give the appearance of an aged bruise. And then I went in with like a little bit of purple and some red and some green, of course, but really what makes it is that deep purple on the bottom lip, and kind of going around the edges and really getting into that cut to kind of bring some depth to it. Then I'm adding some bruising under the eye, just a little, just to kind of really bring that tiredness. And then I decided to add some bruising to the nose as if I had a broken nose. And what I ended up doing was sort of adding surface area to my nose, if that makes sense. By adding a extra curve around the bridge of my nose, I make it seem larger than it actually is, and using those dark kind of bruisey tones, it makes it look swollen in a way. So then finally, to bring it all together, I added some fake blood to both my nostril and my lip.
And I like to smear the blood coming out of my nose just to kind of make it seem like I was on the run, wiping my nose because it was just dripping out. But yeah, that's what the final look ended up looking like. And here's my right side versus my left side.
BackStage is part of our larger programming, Digital Clock. Digital Clock is made possible by a generous gift from Phil and Liz Gross. If you'd like to learn more about our programming or how you can become a supporter, visit us at collegelightoperacompany.com. Tune in again next week for another installment of BackStage.